Shalom. Let's look together at Psalm 8. If you have a Bible, please feel free to turn to that psalm as I will read for you in English. For the leader on the Gittit, a psalm of David. O Lord our God, how majestic is your name throughout the earth, you who have covered the heavens with your splendor. From the mouths of infants and sucklings you have founded strength on account of your foes, to put an end to enemy and avenger. When I behold your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you set in place, what is man that you have been mindful of him? Mortal man, that you have taken note of him, that you have made him little less than divine, and adorned him with glory and majesty. You have made him master over your handiwork, laying the world at his feet, sheep and oxen, all of them, and wild beasts too, the birds of the heavens, the fish of the sea, whatever travels the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name throughout the earth. The psalm begins with the same verse with which it ends. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name throughout the earth. In Hebrew, Adonai Adonenu Ma'adir Shimcha Bechol Haaretz. And in between those two verses, we have mapped out for us a kind of a hierarchy of mastery and majesty. First, we have on that chain, we have God, then we have humankind, and then we have the creatures of the earth, sheep and oxen, wild beasts, birds of the heavens, fish of the sea, and so on. The psalmist is teaching us that God is sovereign or master of all the earth, indeed the universe, but then we, human beings, are little less, one step below the divine, that God has adorned us with glory and majesty. So the majesty is shared. God has majesty, and in a sense, we have majesty too, because according to the scheme of creation, we are meant to be masters over God's handiwork. We are meant to be partners with God in God's work of creation. One of the things that strikes me about this psalm is the insertion of the idea that when I behold the heavens, the work of God's fingers, and I look at the moon and the stars that God set in place, having that in mind, I am moved by the fact that God has taken notice of us and cognizance of us and assigned to us the task of mastery over the earth. One of the messages here, I think, that the psalmist is driving home is an anti-idolatry polemic in a way. The psalmist is reminding us that even though God created the moon and the stars, and we gaze up at them and we are inspired and amazed by their beauty and by their power, nevertheless, the moon and the stars do not have majesty. They do not have mastery over anything, according to the psalmist. They are not independent powers. They are not to be worshipped or venerated as gods in themselves. The moon and the stars do not have the ability to tell the difference between right and wrong. They do not have a conscience like we do. And so because we are created in God's image and have that sense of conscience and an idea of morality, we are understood by the psalmist as having been created in God's image and a little less than the divine. but higher on the hierarchy than the moon and the stars. The psalmist was, of course, writing and creating in a world where so many practiced idolatry and worshiped celestial objects and other things. And the psalmist was well aware that worshiping anything and anyone other than God was a folly and was ridiculous. The only being to worship is God, but we share a portion of God's majesty. In today's world, I see our own majesty, our own godliness played out in our ability to jump out of ourselves, to move from our own personal worries and anxiety, to work through our own nerves, perhaps even our own fear about what is going on around us, and to move from there to a sense of caring and concern for people around us. I am amazed when I hear stories about healthcare professionals who are willing to put their own health and lives on the line in order to keep others healthy and to save lives. I am moved when I hear about other people, non-healthcare workers, who are going to their own jobs at supermarkets and other essential services and places so that the rest of us can continue to enjoy our creature comforts, or at least our necessities, the things that we need to get through in our lives, our food and our other necessities. But they are the ones who are out on the front lines, putting their own safety and their own health at risk. As for me, I am sheltering in place. I'm not going out other than to walk or to exercise outside. I'm staying home. I have the ability to talk to you through these video recordings and to reflect on the Psalms. I am able to get up every day and do my own study and my own worship, my exercise, even some recreation and a little fun by watching entertaining things on the television or reading my books. So I'm very lucky in that sense. But rather than be all wound up in myself and in my own needs and in my own fears and anxieties, it is so important that I take some time to think about you, to think about others in our world who have needs, to show concern for those in our world now who are vulnerable, who are at risk, who are sick, who are losing their jobs and in danger of losing their homes. These qualities of compassion and concern and empathy are what give us as human beings majesty. They entitle us to be partners with God in the way the earth is to be run. These are special qualities that make us human. They put us, in that sense, over inanimate objects like the sun and the stars and the moon. They make us special. They make us, in our own way, godly. I pray that God will continue to give us the strength to find that higher part of ourselves, to get in tune with our own deeper levels of spirituality during these troubled times. Shalom.